Okay, I'm starting with our chapter of snapshots, chapter number 4. That's Albert Einstein at school. Now, this is a story, this is a part of the biography of a great scientist, Albert Einstein. The lesson Albert Einstein at school is an extract from the biography of Albert Einstein named The Young Einstein by Patrick Pringle. In this lesson, Patrick familiarizes the reader with those years in Einstein's life where he was struggling each day in school, and as each day passed, the school diploma felt like a far-fetched dream. See, every child has some hidden qualities, has some hidden talents, but nobody is a born scientist, nobody is a born dancer, or nobody is a born doctor. The talents need to be recognized, the qualities, the virtues need to be nourished and polished so that they improvise, become a passion, and then finally become a strength of the person. Right? So, Einstein at school, he was not a good student and he faced a lot of struggle in his school. The chapter throws light upon a few encounters with his teacher, what he felt about the neighborhood he lived in, and how he had only one good friend, Yuri. The way Albert strategizes to get out of the miserable place. For him, the school was a miserable place because he was not performing well. He was scolded every time by the teachers. He was not a good child, good student. So he faced a lot of challenges there. And how things turned out in the end makes the story really interesting. I'm coming straight away to the text. Harshita, you have to read out the red portion.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, Albert Einstein, Albert Einstein, 1879-1955, is regarded as the greatest physicist since Newton. In the following extract from the young Einstein, the well-known biographer Patrick Pringle describes the circumstances which led to Albert Einstein's expulsion from a German school.
So he was basically expelled from a German school. So here he talks about this particular extract from the biography, tells about the conditions, the circumstances which led to his expulsion from the German school. Please
The
continue.
lesson is The lesson is about the famous theoretical physicist Albert Einstein. It is taken from the biography named The Young Einstein, written by Patrick Pringle. The lesson talks about how Albert Einstein hated school, wanted to leave it, and then was forced out of it.
Please continue reading.
Ma'am, red para, no?
No, black one.
Okay, ma'am. In what year, Einstein asked the history teacher, did the Prussian defeat the French at Waterloo? I don't know, sir. Why don't you know? You have been told it often enough. I must have forgotten. Did you ever try to learn? Asked Mr. Braun. No, sir, Albert replied with his usual unthinking honesty. Why not? I can't see any point in learning dates. One can always look them up in a book. Mr. Braun was speechless for a few moments. You amaze me, Einstein, he said at last. Don't you realize that one can always look most things up in books? That applies to all the facts you learn at school. Yes, sir. Then I suppose you don't see any point in learning facts. Frankly, sir, I don't, said Albert.
Okay. So this is a small incident where a child is not getting things in the school. He's not able to understand anything. So how a teacher scolds a child? You people are very much aware, very much acquainted with all these happenings of the school life, right? So in this particular section, we find the history teacher questioning the child about the Persian War, right? She's talking about the dates. In which year, she asked, did the Persians defeat the French at Waterloo? Albert says, I don't know, sir. The teacher is shocked and she says, why? I have told you this thing several times. Why don't you know? So he said, I must have forgotten. She said, then you have books to learn about the things. What all is taught to you in the school. You've got books to recall all these things. you should have opened up your books and found it in that. You must have learned it. But Einstein was simply quiet. Teacher continued scolding him. Don't you realize that one can always look things into the books? That applies to all the facts you learn at school. Yes, sir. Then I suppose you don't see any point in learning facts. So teacher says that you do not find any sense in learning facts. So Einstein says, actually, I don't. So frankly, I don't find any point learning all these facts. This again shows his lack of interest in these studies when he was a schoolboy. Please continue. Black section.
Then you don't believe in education at all? Oh, yes, sir, I do. I don't think learning facts is education. In that case, said the history teacher with heavy sarcasm, perhaps you will be so kind as to tell the class the Einstein theory of education.
Right. So his definition was that there is no point. If you're mugging up the facts, that is not education. So teacher on this says, oh, will you please tell me your Einstein theory of education, what actually education is? Please continue. So we find the teacher here being very sarcastic because the child is not performing. He is not able to answer back to the teacher. So we find the teacher here a bit rude and sarcastic.
Albert flushed. I think it's not fact that matter, but ideas, he said. I don't see the point in learning the dates of battles or even which of the armies killed more men. I would be more interested in learning why those soldiers were trying to kill each other. That's enough. Mr. Braun's eyes were cold and cruel. We don't want a lecture from you, Einstein. You will stay in for an extra period today, although I don't imagine it will do you much good. It won't do the school any good either. You are a disgrace. I don't know why you continue to come. It's not my wish, sir, Albert pointed out. Then you are an ungrateful boy and ought to be ashamed of yourself. I suggest you ask your father to take you away.
So this stanza clearly tells the manner in which he was nagged, his lack of concentration, his disinterest in studies and academics. He obviously he was scolded harshly by the teacher, and she was of the opinion that if you are so much you do not give value to education at all, then there is no point of you being into the school. So you should ask your father to take you away. Please continue.
Albert felt miserable when he left school that afternoon. Not that it had been a bad day. Most days were bad now anyway. But because he had to go back to the hateful place the next morning, he only wished his father would take him away, but there was no point in even asking. He knew what the answer would be. He would have to stay until he had taken his diploma.
So basically, it was not his choice to be in that school. He wanted to move away from that school, but nobody was going to hear him because, as every parent wants, that the child should do well in education, should score good scores. And so was Einstein's father also much concerned that he should get his school diploma. But Albert was not at all willing or interested to stay in that school because his all the days were as usual bad, where he was scolded, rebuked, trashed by the teachers because of his non performance and because of his lack of concentration. Please continue. Going back to his lodgings.
Going back to his lodgings did not cheer him up. His father had so little money to spare that Albert had been found a room in one of the poorest quarters of Munich. He did not mind the bad food and lack of comfort, or even the dirt and squalor, but he hated the atmosphere of slum violence. His landlady beat her children regularly, and every Saturday her husband came drunk and beat her.
Now, going back to his lodgings did not cheer him up. School was bad for him. He didn't spend good time there. But going back to his lodgings, to his house, was also not a good thing for him. His father had so little money to spare that Albert had been found a room in one of the poorest quarters of Munich. So he was living in the poorest sections of Munich. He did not mind the bad food and the lack of comfort. or even the dirt and the squalor around the surroundings, but he hated the atmosphere of slum violence. Because the child was living in a slum, the obviously we understand the kind of the people who live in a slum. They're not educated. They are at times they're not civilized. They're not cultured. They often used to fight, right? So he was not he really felt that discomfort in that slum environment, in that slum violence. His landlady beat her children regularly, and every Saturday her husband came drunk and beat her. So that was the condition. Husband used to beat the wife used to beat the children. So the violence and that, discomfort where every time you hear that beating sound and the shrieking voices, that really made him very much uncomfortable in that lodge. Please continue, but at least you have a room of your own.
But at least you have a room of your own, which is more than I can say, said Yuri when he called round in the evening. At least you live among civilized human beings, even if they are all poor students, said Albert. They are not civilized, Yuri replied. Did you not hear that one of them was killed last week in a duel? And what happens to the one who killed him? Nothing, of course. He is even proud of it. His only worry is that the authorities have told him not to fight any more duels. He's upset about this because he hasn't a single scar on his face to wear for the rest of his life as a badge of honor. Ugh, exclaimed Albert. And these are the students. Well, you'll be a student one day, said Yuri. I doubt it, said Albert glumly.
Okay, so this is the conversation between Albert and his friend Yuri. Throughout his tenure, we find that Yuri was the one who understands him very nicely. So when he was really upset with the kind of the surroundings he was living in, the slum and everything, so at that time Yuri tried to console Albert by saying that at least you have a room which you can call your own, and at least you live among civilized human beings, even if they are all poor students, said Albert. So Albert said these words to Yuri. Uh, they are not at all civilized. Yuri replied, did you not hear that one of them was killed last week in a duel? So Yuri says that even where I am living, even these people are not at all civilized. Didn't you hear about the one which was killed last week in a duel? And what happens to the one who killed him? Nothing, of course. He's even proud of it. So there were people around who fought the duel. One killed the other, but the one who killed the person was really proud because it was a kind of an achievement for him. But rather, he was more scared. He was more worried that there was no scar or no injury mark on his face, of which he could really feel very proud of, and that would show as a proof of his winning a duel and killing a person, right? So he didn't have that as a badge of honor for his rest of the life. So that was what Albert told her, and these are the students. Well, you'll be a student one day, said Yuri. I doubt it, said Albert glumly. So he says these are the students, and you'll also be a student one day. So Albert was, I don't know, I doubt it, because he was not very sure whether he's going further for his further education or not, as he was, sorry, as he was not really performing well in his school. Please continue. I don't think.
I don't think I will ever pass the exams for the school diploma. He told his cousin Elsa the same next time she came to Munich. Normally she lived in Berlin where her father had a business. I'm sure you could learn enough to pass the exams, Albert, if you tried, she said. I know lots of boys who are much more stupid than you are who get through. They say you don't have to know anything. You don't have to understand what you are taught, just be able to repeat it in the exams. That's the whole trouble, said Albert. I'm no good at learning things by heart.
Okay. So here Albert expresses his concern to his cousin Elsa, saying that it is not very likely for him to pass exam, right? Now we have met two people here, Yuri, his friend, and now it's Elsa, his cousin. She lived normally in Berlin, where her father had a business. I'm sure you could learn enough to pass the exams, Albert. So Elsa was trying to tell her, trying to convince that if you put in a bit more efforts, you'll surely be able to clear your exams. I know a lot of boys who are much more stupid than you are who get through. So she was just trying to explain it to him that if you put in a bit more efforts, then you will surely be able to pass, because she knows a lot of boys who are more stupid, who are not at all good in their academics, but they are able to get through. They say you don't have to know anything, you don't have to understand what you are taught, just be able to repeat it in the exams. Says just be able to repeat it in the exams means what he was perhaps she was trying to convey was just mugging up things should be there. That's the whole trouble, said Albert. I am no good at learning things by heart. So Albert here expressed his problem. He says that is what my problem is. I'm not at all good in mugging up things. I want to have knowledge. I want to understand the concepts, but I cannot mug them up. Please continue.
You don't need to be good at it. Anyone can learn like a parrot. You just don't try, and yet I always see you with a book under your arm, added Elsa. What is the one you are reading? A book on geology. Geology? Rocks and things. Do you learn that? No, we have hardly any science at school. Then why are you studying it? Because I like it. Isn't that a good enough reason? Elsa sighed. You are right, of course, Albert, she said, but it won't help with your diploma.
Now, you don't need to be good at it. Anyone can learn like a parrot. So, Albert says that there is no point being good at mugging up things. Anybody can learn like a parrot. What does a parrot do? He simply imitate things. Whatever you are speaking, he'll copy you. So, you just don't try, and yet I always see you with a book under your arm. So, Elsa here says that, Albert, I have always seen you with a book under your arm, but you do not try. What's the one you are reading? Which book you are reading? A book on geology. Geology, rocks and things. Do you learn that? So Elsa was like, we've hardly any science. They have not been introduced to science at their school at that time. So then why you were studying it? So she was wondering that when you do not know about science, about a particular section or branch of science, then how come you can read a book in detail on rocks and things like that about geology? So Albert on this simply says, because I like it. Isn't that a good reason enough? Elsa sighed. You are right. Of course, Albert, she said, but it won't help with your diploma. So Elsa on this point says that you are reading it, it's good enough, but this thing is not going to help us in our diploma. I think one more stanza we can do. Hurry up, please. Apart from.
Apart from books on science, his only comfort was music, and he held his violin regularly until his landlady asked him to stop. That wailing gets on my nerves, she said. There's enough noise in this house with all the kids howling. Albert was tempted to point out that most of the time it was she who made them howl, but he decided it was better to say nothing.
Right. So he decided it was better to say nothing. Books, and the only thing that brought joy and peace was music. He played the violin a lot, but only until his landlady told him to stop. The sound supposedly irritated her, and she justified by saying that kids are already making a lot of noise in the house. Albert wanted to say that she is the only one who makes her kids cry all the time, but somehow resisted the urge to say it properly for the bit. So he realized that there were children who were making a lot of sound. So he was busy making his violin, playing on his violin. So because the landlady asked him to stop it, he had to. He had no other way. But he was very fond of playing music. We'll stop here, and tomorrow we are going to continue